Those stories and more coming up on FreightWaves Now. Good morning, everybody. Happy Wednesday, and welcome into today's episode of FreightWaves Now. I'm Kaylee Nix here with Anthony Smith.
That's right. Now, in today's episode, we'll introduce you to a new program that can get shippers dedicated service on demand. We'll also have someone on the Wednesday hot seat. But first, our top story is one that we knew was coming, and that's around Chris Kirchner, former CEO of Slync, which was charged with the Department of Justice, which leveraging $65 million fraud scheme. We have Clarissa Hawes joining us to talk about that. Clarissa, thanks so much for being here this morning.
Thanks so much for having me on today.
So we obviously knew that this was coming, right? We knew that the Department of Justice was going to probably throw these charges at Chris Kirchner for what went on with Slync.io and all of the fallout thus after. Give us a little bit of an overview on the charges and what the DOJ is saying.
Sure. And it's actually two agencies that filed charges on the same day, with the Department of Justice filing a criminal complaint, as well as the securities. The SEC also filed a lawsuit or a criminal complaint seeking that he misled investors into the economic health of the company, and to get them to continue to invest. And he overinflated the financials and everything to get more money, when in actuality, that money, according to federal officials, he used to fund his lifestyle, and including, he bought a private jet and traveled all over the world at the same time. When, after this big cash, infusion of $60+ million, that the company wasn't able to make payroll. So there was a lot of questions in early July about what was going on at Slync.
And so, Clarissa, we're looking at the situation now. What was the thing that was mentioned by the DOJ? What are we seeing as next steps from this department?
Sure. Well, he appeared before a judge yesterday, and we'll find out more. Sometimes it's a delay in getting some of those filings posted, so that we can actually see what the total, what they're looking at. But they're saying that, as far as the charge of wire fraud, is that he wired money that was, investor money to his personal checking account. That's what they claim is that he did. It was for the DOJ, they're saying it was a $20 million wire transfer that he sent to his own account, and allegedly, and that money was then used, put in a separate account that he and his wife, they claim that they controlled, and that was used for the purchase of this this Gulfstream plane that has since been sold, but and for other personal expenses like credit card and other things, as far as the DOJ complaint states. But the FBI also yesterday had raided the house prior to his arrest, and sources say that cars were seized, like Ferraris and very high-end cars. And when, I talked to sources on the ground that were involved in knowing what the executive team was paid, and that there's no way that he could have afforded those types of the Gulfstream, the Ferrari, the house that he was living in was a mansion. And they say that, that there was alarm bells raised at the time But and then when their checks started, the paycheck provider said, "Hey, there's no funds here for us to process your payroll." Then they were like, "Well, he's at a golf tournament in Scotland or something in a private. How can there not be enough money for us, to be paid?"
So, Clarissa, for a while there, the future of the whole company was actually uncertain. There were employees who, as you mentioned, were waiting to be paid. There were folks who were wondering, okay, could we even make payroll? And now we've seen the company survive and make it through kind of the transition to a new CEO. What is the company saying after these charges have been leveraged, if they've said anything yet so far?
Sure. I talked in a statement last night. I did hear from Slync, and they're focusing on their new products. They're trying to rebuild their name, and they, according to their chief marketing officer, Greg Keeler, that they are victims of the scam as well. They claim that. And so, they have hired a veteran, CEO, John Urban, to do a turnaround. They're seeking to add more clients and more product offerings and want to put this behind them. But still, yes, they're very much aware and are cooperating with the ongoing investigation.
So I think it's really interesting because the industry now has an example to be made out of these CEOs, right? Obviously, the Trevor Milton case, which happened last year, came to fruition, went in front of a judge. Milton was found guilty. This feels very similar, but to a point where there's full-on money and transactions and wire fraud going on. Do you think that because we saw what happened with Milton back in Nikola, we kind of saw the outcome of that one, that this kind of sets a precedent now for how this case could possibly be handled?
I think there is a strong, a strong case here, especially when investors, with their money, no investor wants to see their money, not get a return on the money that they, when they believe in a company and strongly, and what, sources say is that Kirchner is a very solid sales, they quoted him as a used car salesman and so, investors have a very strong interest in the outcome of this case, in seeking whatever money, that can be found. But, yes, they had hoped that this supply chain platform, would really take off, but now, they're just hoping for maybe a return on some of the money that was, was invested in the company.
And Clarissa, when we're looking at this situation, were there any other entities involved? From your story, it looks like Kirchner had another entity that maybe he used to hide some of the funds. Is that right?
Yes, the KLIM Inc. It was tracked back to a Delaware corporation, and it actually sits on the land right next to the physical address is the land right next to Mr. Kirchner's house, but yes, that's where investigators say that he set up this corporation around the time that he was planning, to move funds to buy this plane under this corporation, and that according to the filings, he owns 51% of the company, while his wife, who has not been charged in this case, had 49% ownership of this corporation, and feds say that this is where the money was used to purchase the jet.
It's going to be interesting to watch for sure as another company leader goes down for some fraudulent activities. Clarissa, thank you for joining us this morning. Of course, we can catch updates on this story as it continues to develop. Where can people go to follow your content?
Sure. You can find me at FreightWaves.com. You can reach out to me at chawes@FreightWaves.com, or my Twitter handle is Cage_Rider. So you can find me there as well.
Awesome, Clarissa. Thanks so much for joining us this morning, and we'll follow up with you again soon.
Okay, see ya.
All right, we're going to head on over to the wall. We've got Tanner Dehart here with Donnie Gilbert to go ahead and give you your first carrier update of the morning.
Day morning of Carrier Update. I'm joined alongside Donnie Gilbert. And Donnie, looks like we're looking at some diesel prices again. What's going on?
Yeah, so a little bit disturbing, and we were worried about this. The diesel market's been very volatile over the past year, and it doesn't take much for them to slow down or push the rates back up. Well, we've seen a little bit of an increase here on this little green line. This is our wholesale price, rack price. It's bounced back up just a little bit here over the last couple of days, and our rate of decline for regular diesel fuel prices, it was coming down about 1 cent per day. Well, yesterday it came down about 0.5 cent. So that decline is slowing. If we continue to see much more increases in the rack price, then we'll probably start to see diesel fuel go back up, or at least level off, and they'll hold their price for maybe a few days or a week. So very important to kind of watch here, see what's going to happen. If we go to the next chart here, the spread. The spread is still at $1.45, and Tony and I have talked about this a lot. You know, normally when we get down here around that $1.10, maybe below $1.10, is when they start to push diesel prices back up. So there's still plenty of room in this spread to keep diesel prices in decline. But like I say, with the volatility, they've kind of gotten, gung-ho about pushing those rates back up. Now, of course, also you can see this decline quickly drop even in one day. Here was a 13-cent drop. That would be if, rack prices came up, diesel prices can kind of continue to go down. This spread can close very quickly, and that's also what they're worried about. They don't want to get upside down in this.
Yeah, you also mentioned about that 110 range. It looks like we were actually just there in late January, so that seems to change pretty quickly.
Yes, and it has lately. Like I say, that's the volatility. It hasn't kind of just been kind of steady like it was, pre-COVID. So here, pre-COVID, we might have seen it, at that 110 mark for quite a while, go down a little bit, then they go up a few cents and down. But after COVID, and of course after the war with Russia here going on, and us getting, banning Russian oil, et cetera, we've seen a lot more volatility going on in the diesel fuel market. So this is a good one to keep an eye on, just on the sheer fact that if it starts getting down here, that diesel fuel prices are going to start increasing here very, very quickly, very soon. So we'll keep an eye on this, keep an eye on the rack price. If it continues to go up, then we might be in a little bit of trouble, because like I say, it goes up a lot faster than it comes down. Here, I'd like to see it drop another $1, and that would take, at the rate that we're going, another 90 days plus. Well, if it's now 0.5 cent a day, we're looking at 6 months, and that's not what I want to see. All right, we'll finish up here. Next chart. Just check on our outbound tender volumes. We'll also check on this tomorrow, and our rejection rates. 10,252. So we're still above that 10,000 mark. We came down. We got real close to it, but we're still above it. We've dropped below it once here in 2023, but for just a short period of time. As you know, Tanner, we indexed this back in March of 2018. Above 10,000, thumbs up. Below 10,000, thumbs down. We're still kind of holding very close to that. It's been pretty steady here for the last, nearly about almost a month here. Mm-hmm. You look at January 15th, that was when we were below it here for a few days, but the rest of it's been right there between 10,000 and 10,500.
Awesome. Thanks, Donnie. Appreciate the carrier update. Now we'll go back over to Kaylee.
Thanks, guys. It's time now for our first check of your headlines for your Wednesday morning. Two Wall Street analysts are saying that Norfolk Southern should not expect a major hit to its bottom line following the derailment in East Palestine, Ohio. The derailment happened over 10 days ago. The crash involved cars hauling hazardous chemicals, including vinyl chloride, which is used to make packaging materials. The analysts pointed to previous derailments for their estimations of what NS could pay for this situation, saying that the railroad might have to give up $40 to $50 million in a casualty charge. That amount would be about 1.7% of its 2022 total profits. Tusk Logistics is the newest player in the U.S. parcel delivery space after debuting last month at Manifest in Las Vegas. The company uses its data platform to support the networks of 4 regional carriers and is actively seeking the business of a 5th. Tusk currently operates an asset-light network and is aimed at professional shippers like direct-to e-commerce merchants, shipping between 100 and 1,000 parcels per day. Its fees are around 40% less than the typical parcel carrier. And divisions of the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers and the Brotherhood of Railway Carmen unions have reached sick leave agreements with CSX, bringing the total number of unions in agreement up to 6. The railroad said that this was building momentum towards finding solutions for a better work experience for its employees, that this agreement was a great demonstration of partnership. And you can find these stories and so much more up on FreightWaves.com as well as in our FreightWaves app. Give us a like and subscribe if you're watching us live on YouTube. And of course, head on over to tv.freightwaves.com for anything else you might need. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with our first check of weather, and John Gallagher joins us. Don't go away. The 2023 Freight Tech 25 list is filled with meaningful innovators from across the industry who are helping shape what the future of supply chain will look like. Check out the full list of these companies and all the latest Freight Tech news at FreightWaves.com.
From the truckload quoting page within TIE-TMS, you can create a new shipment to instantly display your historical lane average alongside all of the market-leading rating intelligence tools. In just a few clicks, you can adjust the quote, add your margin, select your quote response template, and email an official quote right off to the customer from the same page. Request a demo today at tie-software.com to find out how TIE-TMS can optimize your quoting process.
Welcome to Drilling Deep. I'm your host, John Kingston. Drilling Deep is the place where we talk about oil and we talk about diesel, and you have to drill to get oil and you have to get oil to make diesel, so that's why we call it Drilling Deep. Drilling Deep drops every Friday on FreightWaves TV and all available podcast platforms.
Welcome back to FreightWaves Now. It's time for our first check of the weather on your Wednesday. We've got a couple rounds of winter weather, severe weather, and really just a very active weather pattern going on for the end of this week into the start of this weekend. We're going to touch on it in a couple of different phases. First thing we're going to talk about is some continued winter weather, some sleet, some rain, some snow, and some ice. All 4 forms of precipitation going on across the northern parts of the Great Lakes and reaching up into the northern Great Plains. So let's take a look at that right now in Sonar Critical Events. We've got the radar turned on, and if we zoom in a little bit on what's going on across Minnesota and into Wisconsin, some of that precipitation has moved well up into the northeast over that Great Lakes area into the upper peninsula of Michigan, but we're still hanging on with some lighter pockets of snow and mixed precip further back into Minnesota and into the Dakotas. So because of that, we do have winter weather advisories in place from Fargo down through St. Cloud, and we do have blizzard warnings in place along the I-94 corridor and the I-29 corridor moving through the eastern pieces of the Dakotas. That's going to be for some pretty strong winds coupled with this blowing snow that's going on. And a lot of this could even be what's called a ground blizzard. That's where you get the blowing snow from the snow that has already fallen. That snow is pretty light and fluffy, so as the winds come through, it picks it up and causes blizzard conditions and low visibility, even though it's not necessarily actively snowing. We've got more precipitation expected to fill in here for today, so winter weather advisories and winter storm warnings in place all the way from Kansas up through Iowa in through just to the north of the Chicago metro. We've got winter weather advisories and winter storm watches in place for Chicago and then down into the Illinois and Missouri areas as well. It's going to be kind of just a concentrated area of precipitation and winter snow for those areas. Then it'll eventually fill in, become a little bit more broad as we move into your Wednesday afternoon and into your Thursday. We'll talk a little bit about the beginnings of this storm, how that's setting up across the desert Southwest in just a few minutes. Right now, though, we're going to toss things over to Isaiah Buchanan for a look at what is trending on social media.
Roundabout, everyone. I'm Isaiah Buchanan, and today is the day that you've all been waiting for. It's World Hippo Day, and you might not know, but hippos are some of the most aggressive and territorial animals on the planet. And this video that I have from my favorite TikToker just goes into depth just how dangerous they really are.
Friendly reminder that hippos don't swim, they're so dense that they sink to the bottom, so the hippo's literally sprinting at them full send underwater. Also, watch that video and count how many times the driver had to look back. As he knows as well as I do, getting caught up with a hippo is how your mother loses a dependent. As you finna be depending on the grace of God to ever walk again. Hippos are agents of malice and vehicles of population control with negative morality. This man rescued an orphan baby hippo from a flood in a river. The hippo went on to maul, murk, and mutilate his foster father in the very same river when he got older. This man was swallowed by a hippo not once but 3 times, and by the time he escaped, he had taken 38 bite wounds, including one so crucial that he and the people around him found out what his lungs looked like that day. Hippos are an Avengers-level threat to anything with a heartbeat, from humans to antelope to lions that don't know but mess around and find out. They're even menaces to each other, which is why a hippo baby shower can have a double meaning if things go south. Hippos are what would happen if killer whales had legs. That wasn't even a joke. The hippo's closest cousins are cetaceans like dolphins and whales. Hippos put 404s on at least 500 birth certificates a year, but some years that number could very well be in the thousands. I can't tell you what color his pants are, but they just got a brown paint job.
Like, I'd have some brown stains in my shorts too if a hippo got that close to me. But hippos, when they're young, they can be really quite cute. Now, the Cincinnati Zoo has 2 of my favorite hippos, Fritz and Fiona, and that's going to be Fiona on the right. She is the older brother of Fritz, who is on the left. Just look how happy Fritz is right there hanging out with his big sister. I mean, they can be pretty cute when they're young, but when they get older, don't mess with them, because the more you mess around, the more you find out. That's all I have for this edition of the Social Roundabout. Right now, I'm going to toss things back over to Kaylee and Anthony.
Me and hippos have that in common. Cute, but terrifying.
You know, I think at one point in time, the U.S. tried to bring hippos here and really kind of create some sort of hippo ranch to even have hippo steaks. Yeah.
So that's.
I think that was a thing at one point in time.
I don't like that at all. I don't like that at all. All right, Isaiah, thank you for that. We'll talk to you a little bit later. Right now, we're going to welcome in our next live guest. So we've got our Washington correspondent, John Gallagher, to talk a little bit about how the FMCSA might be changing their own rules on safety classifications. John, thanks for being here. Let's dig right into this. What is FMCSA saying, and how does it differ from what we have right now?
Carrier safety. So the point is to better assess the unsafe carriers, and then theoretically this would lead to less crashes. So just as some background, the National Academy of Sciences, they were called on by Congress several years back to evaluate how the FMC is ranking these carrier safety. And one of the things that they recommended was this model called item response theory to replace the current system that FMCSA is using, which is called their safety management system, SMS. And so what happened just this week, or actually today, is that the FMCSA has announced that after several years of studying this IRT model, they found it's too complex to put in place, and they figured that it would be too complex for carriers to figure out and understand as well. So they're going to scrap that basically, and they're just going to improve the current safety management system that they have. So FMCSA uses this SMS to identify those carriers with potential safety problems, as I mentioned. And so the higher your SMS score, and I'm probably not saying anything that anyone doesn't know here, but the higher your score, the more violations you have, and the worse you're doing compared to other carriers. And they use these 7 categories to get your score. And so when you have a higher score, you're more likely to be pulled over. So the cost factor there is, the more you're pulled over, it wastes your time, it wastes fuel, and also maybe even more important, the insurance companies know your score too. They get this information, so it leads to higher premiums as well. So it's obviously very important. So what the FMCSA is doing, they're going to reorganize these 7 categories that they use. They're also paring down the list of violations. There's like close to 1,000 different types of violations that go into this system that they use to get this score. So they're paring that down to like 115 or 16. That's another thing they're doing. It's trying to make it easier and basically, again, identify these high-risk carriers. One of the things they found, and one of the changes they're making, is when they were doing this analysis of that IRT I mentioned, that complex analysis model, they found that straight trucks, like delivery trucks and your smaller trucks, have more violations on average than semi trucks. So, but the model that was in place was not taking this into account. So that's another change that they're making. So this will better, make it more fair for semi tractors and tractor trailers to get analyzed by the system. Another example, they're going to focus more on recent violations rather than violations that a carrier might have gotten 2 years ago. So they're going to, which is going on currently. They go that far back, so they're going to pare that down or tighten that up to 1 year of violation, so that you're not dinged for violation, because you might have improved in that last year, but you're still getting scored based on those past violations. So that's another thing they're doing. They found out that if they were to do that, there's already more than 1,000 carriers that would not be in the high risk group for getting pulled over, and they also found that those carriers are 13% more safe than they were before. So that's another change they made. So anyway, that's sort of what they're trying to do, and what's sort of going on. Those are sort of the kind of basics that they found out.
So, John, is there any intersection between this public knowledge carrier, FMC gathered data, and private carrier rating data? There's a lot of companies out there that use broker input or shipper input where they can kind of like rank carriers and score them that way, but there's not really an intersection between the two, right? Or is there, and could we possibly be heading towards that?
I'm not sure about that, Kaylee. I'll have to, I'm not sure. That's a really good question. One of the, I checked in with a group that kind of, that's a bit aligned with larger carriers, and they said these are mostly good improvements, but we didn't get into the private carrier aspect of that. So that would be something I have to follow up on.
And John, do we have any public reaction so far to this proposal?
I haven't gotten a lot. I mean, it just came out. The preview came out yesterday. I mean, basically, like I said, I talked to one person, and they said it was a good thing. This is sort of a long time in coming. There was one change that the industry was looking for, that that FMC is not going to change in their SMS, and that is accounting for the different rates of agencies in motor carrier agencies in the different states that are responsible for putting out violations. There's been complaint that there are some states and some regions that issue violations at higher rates than other states for the same, everything being equal, they put out more violations. And so some carriers that focus their operations just in that region are saying that that's not really fair, because these rankings are based on how you compare to carriers throughout the country. And if there's one region or state has a higher violation rate for whatever reason, or puts out issues violations at a higher rate than other states, and you need to take that into account. For those companies that focus their operations just in those states or regions. So, but the FMCSA basically said, we base a lot of our funding. This would basically hurt how we fund the different states, or change how we fund the different states to upkeep their motor carrier enforcement. So they basically said, and it would be unsafe anyway. We're not gonna be less. There's no reason to have less oversight in different areas than another. That would just be unsafe. So that's one thing that, from what I understand, has been looking for, but that's not going to change.
So then, does this change any recommendations that we see being made by like the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance, by anything of more in the advocacy side instead of the enforcement side? Is this going to change how maybe they message to these carriers by changing just to know, hey, this is what FMCSA is now looking for, so maybe make these adjustments instead of these ones?
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case, Kaylee. This could, there's a 90-day, the FMCSA is putting out a 90-day comment period on this, so we'll see how these different associations and industries associations will react to this. So it should be interesting. They're also, it's big enough change that they're also, FMCSA is also going to be hosting like 4 webinars just on Q&A webinars over the next 3 months on this, for people to kind of sort this out. So we'll see how this changes. It'll be interesting to follow up on this.
Definitely going to be interesting for sure. John, thanks so much for joining us this morning. If people want to reach out to you, get a little bit more information about this, how can they do that? My email, jgallagher@freightwaves.com, and also I'm at Twitter at John A. Gallagher 1.
Awesome, John. Thank you for that. We'll keep up with this as it continues to develop. Right now, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with more FreightWaves Now.
From the truckload quoting page within TieTMS, you can create a new shipment to instantly display your historical lane average alongside all of the market-leading rating intelligence tools. In just a few clicks, you can adjust the quote, add your margin, select your quote response template, and email an official quote right off to the customer from the same page. Request a demo today at tie-software.com to find out how TieTMS can optimize your quoting process.
Like F3, we know what they want is a chance to show off their products, their swag, and make new partnerships that will last until our next FreightWaves event.
But the problem is there are so many industry events, it can be so hard to find the right one to invest your time and energy in. We at FreightWaves take your investment seriously.
Which is why we've brought together thousands of industry professionals in one city over 3 days to showcase all you have to offer.
Because your successful connections at an event like F3 move all of us forward.
Don't believe us?
Join us in June.
Hey everybody. This is Thomas Watson, enterprise trucking carrier expert here at FreightWaves, telling you about my show, Loaded and Rolling. Now, it involves trucking topics for large carriers and even small ones that wish to be large. Anything that impacts trucking, you can get it there. You can catch us every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern on tv.freightwaves.com. We do it live.
Welcome into another carrier update. Donnie, it looks like we're looking at some ocean data. What's going on?
Yeah, so we're looking at all pickups headed to all U.S. ports. So pickups anywhere in the world headed to any and all of our U.S. ports. And of course, you know, back in the day here, earlier this year, we saw the huge drop. And that kind of indicated that we knew that this big boom with what was going on with COVID was coming to an end. And since then, we've seen them slightly go down here, just month by month, imports going down. And then here, of course, this month, we see the big dip. Now, part of this is because of the Chinese Lunar New Year's. But we're starting to see a little bit of a recovery here. Now, since these are the volume index, which these are the volumes that are registered as the ship is loaded and leaving, these ones that where this big dip is, we're going to see that coming up here probably near the end of this month, because ships will be arriving, but it's going to be less volume. So we might see ports kind of ease up a little bit. And since a lot of this is going to be from China, it's going to be the ports on the West Coast that might struggle there for a little bit. But they kind of had a little bit of a pull forward. And then, of course, you're going to see volumes pick back up here. We're already seeing kind of volumes pick back up after it. So that's what we need to keep an eye on. How much will those volumes pick back up? And again, at this point, we are 30 days out from delivery. So it's going to be, you know, what we're looking at here is really going to give us an insight of what's going to be happening next month. So here, about March 15th, you're going to see this pickup of these more freight coming into the ports. Now, if we go to the next chart here, we're going to look at it, and this is picking up in China and coming to the USA. And of course, here is that big drop for the New Year's. And again, here it is picking back up. So again, this is what we really need to pay attention to. How much is this going to pick back up? Because this is going to dictate what starts to happen more or less on the West Coast here about mid-March.
Now, usually you see a pretty big order cadence coming up leading in December, late November to gear up for Chinese New Year, but it wasn't as drastic this year as it has been in the past.
No, because we are spending less money. Imports from China are down, and that's a big signal of what is to come. And now, if we start spending our money again, and that's what happens in a recession. People get nervous, people get scared, they start buying less, or they have less money to spend, because right now we go out and we fill our tanks up, buy some groceries, and we don't have any money anymore. And that's what's kind of leading into all this. Or when the people that do have some money left over, they're getting nervous and scared, and they start holding their money instead of spending, and that can put us in a real downward spiral into a recession. You start spending your money, we can pull ourselves out of that. Well, we need to start spending our money, because if you go back here, as you said here, last year, that's 22. Yeah, you see bigger spikes, and then the drop. Here we go, the pull forward and the drop. So, and then of course, right after it, you see the flow of goods right after it. And this is what I'm looking for to see if this happens again. This being right here that we haven't got to yet. How much this picks up will dictate, you know, how much volumes are going to hit back on the West Coast. Is it going to pick back up? And that can really affect rates. Let's get one more chart here and another one to keep an eye on. And this is the bookings. So bookings is about 8 days before it's loaded on the boat right now. It used to be up to about 14, but now since demand for capacity is dropping, they don't have to book their load quite so early. It's been pretty steady here. It did not bounce back up as high as we wanted it to. But like I say, coming off this big dip, they may not have to book those capacity on those ships quite as early as they used to. So we might actually get a little bit of a surprise here, and the boats still recover quite well.
Thanks, Donnie. Appreciate you guys joining us. We'll send it back over to Kaylee and Anthony.
Spotlight. Stay. of, I think, our longest running and probably one of our most beloved communities. We've got Truck Tech here with Alan Adler. Subscriber count well over 10,000 by now, Alan. We're excited to talk a little bit about Lidar today. Let's break it down.
Numbers first. It's over 12. I haven't looked lately, but we're doing well. It's still growing, which is a good thing. So you want to talk Lidar first. You know, it's interesting. This is not breaking news. This was expected, but back in November, two of the Lidar players, Adler and Velodyne, announced that they would be merging. This is part of a shakeout, quite honestly, that we started writing about back in 2021, that it was coming, and I haven't really followed up much on it since. Brian Strait, when he was here, wrote about the initial announcement of the merger. It closed this week, and so I had a chance to catch up with Angus Pakala, who is the CEO at Adler. We've known each other for a while, and he took me through sort of the rationale, how this all worked. And you know, he's very bullish on his own company. Now, you know, if you look at the stock price, you're not going to be too bullish on it unless you're, you know, kind of a value investor. But the truth is they are turning out, you know, they have a good gross margin on their business, selling equipment that basically helps the vision for autonomous trucks and a lot of other things. You know, they have a number of verticals, including, you know, warehouse robotics and things like that, where they provide Lidar, which is essentially, you know, bouncing light off to see the distance that something is away. So, you know, Adler, you know, has done pretty well on the revenue side. They're, you know, not at profitability yet, but they certainly have continued to bring in revenue and customers. Velodyne, which, you know, came out of the gate in a really good way. I think they were initially valued at $1.8 billion or something like that back in 2020. It really never quite caught on. And so, you know, these two ended up merging. And what's really interesting here is that a year ago, they were fighting it out in court over patent infringement. So, you know, those things have all been kind of put to rest. Everybody's getting along well, and they're going forward. But this is indicative of what's happening in the Lidar space. There will be more mergers, or more likely there will be failures, because there's just not enough room for everybody to provide this technology across the board, and you know, excuse me, to an industry that only needs probably, you know, call it 3 to 5 players to provide this technology.
And Alan, we're looking at Lidar and the race to perfect it. Is that biggest thing really to really be operating, to be able to operate around the autonomous market, or will there be other applications for this?
Well, the other applications, like I mentioned, you know, Anthony, you know, warehouse, you know, vision and things like that. There are a lot of uses for Lidar. I mean, we're interested because of the autonomous truck space. And, you know, we've got other examples, you know, where companies like Blackmore, which was a standalone company out of Montana, was absorbed by Aurora Innovation. And then Aurora turned that into a company, or, you know, a technology called First Light. And, you know, so there have been other examples, but we had a big wave in 2021 of these companies all grabbing for the gold, that is the SPAC money, and going public probably before they were ready. Maybe they just, you know, felt they had to get out there. And unfortunately, it's a tough road for many of them. Even the leader in this space, which I would suggest is Luminar, you know, has its own issues right now. I mean, you know, they've all seen their stock price fall a lot. But again, we've talked about that. It's only a single metric. But, you know, cash is something to keep an eye on. And then also just, you know, customer base. I mean, are they getting customers? You know, Adler had a deal with Plus to do sort of close in kind of the radar that you need around the vehicle, you know, call it, you know, 20 meters or whatever. And they got that with Plus. Then they got Torque as a customer, which is the independent subsidiary of Daimler Truck, for autonomy. So, you know, these kinds of things are, if you don't get the customers and get the contracts, you're not going to last, right? That's true for any business.
And the interesting thing about Lidar is that as a remote sensing technology, the tech itself isn't necessarily new. We've been using it in remote sensing for sciences for a very long time. What's new is the application to the autonomous truck space. Do we see that Lidar has been used before in autonomous passenger vehicles, like are the ones that have been developed over previous years, or is this like the new actual vehicle application, is that new application of Lidar overall?
Well, you know, Kaylee, we have obviously focused on the truck side, but it is very big in cars. I mean, autonomous, you know, ride hailing and, you know, things like that. There's even some applications for for Lidar in, assisted driving rather than, full autonomous driving. So yeah, the car market is very big. And that's where, Luminar, as I mentioned a moment ago, they've done very well in the car space. Ouster has some car clients coming up. There's going to be, markets around the world, notably Europe, for this technology. So it's just going to be, who has the best mousetrap and provides the best reliability in these systems. It's very narrow to just look at the truck industry for Lidar. That's why we don't cover it kind of on a weekly basis, because it's an enabling technology and it's a very important technology, but it applies to, the passenger car vehicle market, as you mentioned, just as much or more than it does to trucks.
And Alan, what does the next potential year look like here? I mean, you mentioned, of course, it's likely going to be some shakeout here, some consolidation, some mergers, some acquisitions. Do you see any significant steps forward in this area?
Well, it's really hard for me. As I said, we're not covering this on a weekly basis. So it's really hard to know, week to week, who's in what position. I mean, I would not have predicted Velodyne and Ouster, because if you're not paying attention and you're not watching it, things are going on behind the scenes, and maybe even there's public hints that you're not going to catch if you're not watching. So I can't really give you a roadmap to what's happening. I think you just have to look at this the way we look at even autonomous trucking, and that is, how many do we really need, once we have the redundant chassis to put these systems on, how many do we really need, and what is going to be the one that one or two or three that people really want?
So let's move into Truck Tech, our show this afternoon, and Truck Tech, the newsletter coming out. Starting with the show, what can we expect to see this afternoon, 4 o'clock today?
Well, we had big news this week from Cummins, and it's been surprisingly, the take on the story about the introduction of a new 10-liter engine that can run, obviously on diesel to start with, and then they'll make a version for hydrogen, they'll make a propane version, and so forth. A 10-liter engine really is a tweener. It fits between the medium-duty needs and heavy-duty needs. As engines get smaller, or I should say engine displacements get smaller, moving forward, and the weight factors and things like that. Cummins is replacing 2 of its legacy products, the X12, which is in a lot of use, and the L9, which also has a big customer base in that medium duty area, with 1 engine in 2026. This isn't happening tomorrow. But it's interesting because we have Jose Sampiero, who is the new head of on-highway for Cummins, coming on the show today, as well as Andrew Roble, who is with the powertrain consultant group called Ryan Associates. So we'll have a good discussion with them this afternoon. And we'll obviously talk about this 10X product and, X10 product. And we'll also get into sort of the where are things headed from an alternative fuels perspective in engines and that kind of stuff. So it should be a really interesting conversation, we hope.
I love that, and I love that you brought up Cummins, because I've read about it in headlines really the past 3 days, talking about bringing their new power division into profitability, and really honestly positive reviews from CEO Jennifer Rumsey now. Is that kind of the thread over there at Cummins? Is they're really excited about what's coming to the forefront, and they're dropping all of this really exciting technology developments offerings to get that new power division turned over?
Well, new power is fascinating because, we spotted that a while back. We've had Amy Davis, on the shows around, on FreightWaves a number of times. She's the president of that unit, and she'll be with us in March on Truck Tech, as a matter of fact. But I think that, there's a change underway at Cummins. They are always going to be a diesel engine company as long as there's diesel. And we all agree that's going to be for another couple decades anyway. So they're going to be a leader there. They supply everybody, even if companies make their own engines, they also offer a Cummins engine. So they're going to be fine in the diesel space, and that's paying for, quite honestly, a lot of what's happening in New Power. New Power is focused on fuel cells. It's focused on these electrolyzers that we wrote about last week. That's hydrogen chemical making chemical reaction that makes hydrogen and the devices for those. So New Power gets a lot of attention at Cummins. At some point, and this is something that Jennifer Rumsey's predecessor, Tom Lineberger, told me, he said, at some point you are going to see a flip where Cummins is better known for the new power stuff, including absorbing, Meritor, which was a big $3.7 billion acquisition last year, to make fully integrated electric products for the trucking industry. And so they've got their fingers in everything at Cummins, and it's something to keep watching. They also happen to like Valentine's Day. It was a year ago on Valentine's Day that they announced that they would start doing these, what they call fuel agnostic engines that can run on different fuels. And of course, they extended that with the X10 engine this week.
Awesome. Well, definitely going to be intriguing to watch for sure. And real quick, when can people watch that episode that's going to be coming out today?
Live today, Anthony, at 4 o'clock Eastern, Truck Tech on FreightWaves TV. Then it'll go right to podcasts on Apple and Spotify and kind of your favorite platforms. We are part of the community now, which is great. And, we'll be back with you, I guess, on Friday to talk about what we're going to have in the newsletter.
Awesome, Alan. Thank you so much for joining us. We will talk to you on Friday. Right now, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with more FreightWaves Now.
Welcome back to another edition of Check Call. Check Call. Check Call. Check Call. Let's go. Nobody works for free, so why should we be expecting our drivers to? Okay, let's just get it together now. What are some of those proactive steps that you can start taking now? For myself, I would like the Earth to still be here for a little bit longer, but is a hot dog a sandwich?
Oh, okay. Is pizza an open-faced sandwich? It's bread.
I have been ready for this question. I've seen the show.
We're all in this together.
Thanks for making me hungry. Now I want a hot dog.
You're welcome. Catch episodes of Check Call Tuesdays at 12:30 on FreightWaves TV. Keep up with all things Check Call on freightwaves.com/checkcall. See you on the internet.
From the truckload quoting page within TMS, you can create a new shipment to instantly display your historical lane average alongside all of the market-leading rating intelligence tools. In just a few clicks, you can adjust the quote, add your margin, select your quote response template, and email an official quote right off to the customer from the same page. Request a demo today at tie-software.com to find out how TMS can optimize your quoting process.
Welcome back to FreightWaves Now. For our second check of the weather this morning, we're watching that second round of snow move through the desert Southwest today, bringing once again some pretty heavy snowfall amounts across Arizona into northern New Mexico and pretty much across all of Colorado right now. So let's take a look at the radar up on Sonar Critical Events. Right now we can see, if we look pretty deep into the desert Southwest, heaviest snow going on along that I-10 corridor between the New Mexico border and Tucson, up in through Las Cruces, and then through I-25 up into the Albuquerque area, really along that whole I-25 corridor throughout the state. We've got strong winds and some heavy snowfall going on. So with this, we've got winter storm warnings in place across the state up into the New Mexico-Colorado border. That includes Santa Fe. That includes the mountains of Albuquerque. The city of Albuquerque is underneath a winter weather advisory for today, but still expecting to see some pretty heavy snowfall as well as some strong winds coming out of this. Snow is really going to be limited to the higher elevations once you get down south, but we can't necessarily rule it out along that I-10 corridor right across the Arizona border. Further up into Colorado, basically all of I-25 from the northern parts of the state all the way down through the Colorado-New Mexico border, seeing snow along that I-25 corridor, up in through Denver, and then along I-70 as well. Expecting some heavy snow today, along with some pretty strong winds. So we've got winter storm warnings in place there across the whole entire state. Total snowfall from this going to be about 10 to 14 inches in those highest elevations in the mountains. Lower elevations in those roadways expecting between about 4 and 8 in some places, just depending on where you're at. Grassy surfaces obviously going to have a little bit more accumulation than those roadways, but still expect some driving difficulties there, basically pretty much throughout the whole state of Colorado and New Mexico for today and into tomorrow. That snow moves up further to the northeast by the time that tomorrow hits, so we'll talk about that coming up a little bit later on in the show. Right now, we'll toss things back over to Isaiah for our next look at the social roundabout.
Welcome into Social Roundabout, everyone. I'm Isaiah Buchanan. Words are hard this morning. Not really sure what's going on there. Yesterday was Valentine's Day, and two little and big things happened. Yesterday was the end of an era for Microsoft. They announced that they are getting rid of or retiring Internet Explorer. Yes, I know. Go ahead and get taps playing. So Microsoft released Internet Explorer back in 1995. It was a part of Windows 95, and it at one point had 95% of the market. That's unheard of for nowadays. I mean, because you have so many more competitors. You're looking at Google Chrome, Safari, Firefox, all of these different platforms now, or browsers that people can use. But Microsoft is now pushing people towards Microsoft Edge, which that's been out for several years now. It's just now fully taking over for Microsoft. But that's going to be the browser that they will use. I highly doubt that it will be able to take over 95% of the market, considering, like I said, there are so many other browsers that you can use. Now, switching things up just a little bit, we talked a lot about Valentine's Day yesterday, and there is a otter paintings going on in a zoo in New Hampshire. They were using otters to create paintings, and they're selling them online. If you go to their website, this is the Learning Shores Zoo. This is their 3 otters that they had making paintings. They would put paint on the ground for them, and then they would just kind of walk over it. I mean, that's really all otters can do, but look how cute they are. I mean, those animals are absolutely adorable, much cuter than the hippos, if I do say so myself. Although the baby hippos are very cute, but I mean, otters, like, if I could have an animal outside of like a normal household pet, it would be an otter. And look, they're like little Picassos too. So if you want one of those, you can go to Learning Shores website. I believe it's learningshoreszoo.com. So you can get otter painting. How about that? Anthony, Kaylee, you guys want an otter painting?
For sure, I'd hang an otter painting in my house.
I'd do that and probably look abstract and maybe a little bit exotic.
Yeah, there you go. All right, Isaiah, thank you for that. We'll talk to you a little bit later on in the show. Did you get everything you wanted for Valentine's Day yesterday?
I was really hoping I was going to get an invite from my girlfriend to the Future of Supply Chain Week.
Global Supply Chain Week is coming up in just about 6 days, so no worries, Anthony. You can still go ahead and get registered, even though Megan didn't get you that for Valentine's Day. It's okay.
But I can also be registered and get eligible for giveaways, right?
Absolutely. So not only is it free to enter, but it is free to possibly win some awesome prizes there. Everything from a big green egg to an Apple TV to, look at that, it's a cool little Yeti camp chair there. So make sure you head on over to live.freightwaves.com and get registered for Global Supply Chain Week. This is our biggest virtual event of the year. And while you're over there, might as well plan out the rest of your virtual event schedule as well.
That's right, because these virtual events are amazing opportunities to network. And when you get to be in-person events, it's going to be awesome just to be able to meet with all the people that you've been chatting with, connecting with throughout this entire year, and of course throughout these virtual events.
So head on over to live.freightwaves.com. You've got time to get registered right now because we're going to take a look at the last 24 hours in freight, and then we'll throw it to a quick break.
When guests come to an event like F3, we know what they want is a chance to show off their products, their swag, and make new partnerships that will last until our next FreightWaves event.
But the problem is there are so many industry events, it can be so hard to find the right one to invest your time and energy in. We at FreightWaves take your investment seriously.
Which is why we've brought together thousands of industry professionals in one city over 3 days to showcase all you have to offer.
Because your successful connections at an event like F3 move all of us forward.
Don't believe us?
Join us in June.
From the truckload quoting page within TMS, you can create a new shipment to instantly display your historical lane average alongside all of the market-leading rating intelligence tools. In just a few clicks, you can adjust the quote, add your margin, select your quote response template, and email an official quote right off to the customer from the same page. Request a demo today at tie-software.com to find out how TMS can optimize your quoting process.
And welcome back to FreightWaves Now. It's time for your 10 a.m. check of headlines this morning. Tusk Logistics is the newest player in the U.S. parcel delivery space after debuting last month at Manifest in Las Vegas. The company uses its data platform to support the networks of 4 regional carriers and is actively seeking the business of a 5th. Tusk currently operates an asset-light network and is aimed at professional shippers like direct to e-commerce merchants shipping between 100 and 1,000 parcels per day. Its fees are around 40% less than the typical carrier. Divisions of the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers and the Brotherhood of Railway Carmen Unions have reached sick leave agreements with CSX, bringing the total number of unions in agreement up to 6. The railroad said that this was a building momentum towards finding solutions for a better work experience of its employees. Now, this agreement was a great demonstration of partnership. Canadian software as a service provider, Descartes has acquired final mile automation platform GroundCloud for $138 million. The company automates operations and compliance by helping final mile carriers manage assets and routing, orders, and provide driver safety training and monitoring. The network uses video telematics and event detection to provide coaching tips to drivers as they are driving. The upfront purchase price excludes up to $80 million in potential earnout, which is tied to undisclosed revenue targets over the next 2 years, and Descartes used cash on hand to fund the deal. Gas Information Systems has released its January report, finding more freight flowing into the truckload space for the month. The shipments index was flat with December on a seasonally adjusted basis, but down 3.2% on an unadjusted comparison. The index normally sees a low to mid single-digit decline from December to January. Several management teams said that January likely benefited in the freight markets from a backlog of freight due to winter storms in December. And the Chicago warehouse real estate market keeps growing, with 48 big box buildings delivered during 2022. These are buildings that are 200,000 square feet or bigger. The total square footage for those deliveries stood at 25.5 million square feet. 35 of those buildings were developed on speculative construction, so there were no tenant commitments before construction was finished. The 48 builds were the most ever recorded in a single year, 46% higher than the previous record year. And you can find details of these stories and more up on FreightWaves.com or in our FreightWaves app. Give us a like and subscribe if you're on our YouTube channel, and a follow on social media to stay updated. Head on over to tv.freightwaves.com for anything you might have missed during the week. And right now, we're going to toss it back over to Tanner and Donnie for our next carrier update.
Welcome into another carrier update. Donnie, looks like we're looking at some port data. What's going on?
Yeah, so we looked at what was going on across the pond. Now we'll look at it as it comes in. So I've got our port data pulled up here, the volumes that are coming through the ports. Now what I'm looking at here is I'm looking at a monthly change. So we're comparing right now to 1 month ago. And the reason I had to do this is because I see a lot of green for once we got things that are increasing. So this is a positive sign. Port of Long Beach up 45%, Port of New York 5%, Port of Savannah 3.6%, LAX about 1%, roughly almost no change there. Port of Houston 16%, and that's this time last month versus right now. So we're seeing a good increase, and that's positive for the first quarter right now. And hopefully, we'll make these guys a little bit more busy this month that are hauling these containers on the ports. And of course, they were back in January. Now, if we go to the next chart here. This is the year to year. This is looking at this time last year versus right now. Of course, this time last year was before that big drop in freight. So we see a lot of red. That's why I wanted to pull the other one up first. I want to see a sea of green first. But you go out and you look, you see Port of Long Beach is roughly no change. Los Angeles about 3% almost. New York down 22% almost. Port of Savannah down 12%. And that's a big change going from this time last year to right now. And these guys that are trying to figure out what happened between last year and this year, well, this is why. We saw it drop, last year in the springtime, all that freight drop off the import board. And it's obviously continued on through now.
Yeah, and it also looks like the East Coast has gotten hit a little bit harder than the West Coast. I mean, New York's down 21%, Savannah down 12%. But California has not been nearly as hit as hard as the East Coast.
So that's actually, you bring up a really good point here. Let's go to the next chart to talk about that a little bit quick here. Next chart, I have a little graph here that shows the split between East Coast and West Coast. So if we go back and look, this line right here is 0. Right here, if this line is above it, it's cheaper to bring your shipment from China to the East Coast and then to Chicago. If it's below the 0 line, it's cheaper, or it's more expensive to bring it to the West Coast and train it by rail to Chicago. So that's what this graph is all about. It's China either going to the West Coast or the East Coast, and then it being shipped to Chicago. So. Back during the main part of COVID, the West Coast got really expensive, bringing it into and it got backed up as well. So that happening, it was actually got cheaper and quicker for them to go to the East Coast ports through here. Or actually, yeah. And then, of course, now it's a little bit more expensive going back to the West Coast ports now. So there's been a fluctuation, a shift in freight. I might say that a little bit backwards here. West Coast more expensive, East Coast more expensive. Yes, as COVID eased up and the freight dropped, the East Coast became more expensive. So they're going back to the West Coast. And now here, we might see them going back to the East Coast some, because the West Coast is now just barely $329 more expensive to ship a container from China to Chicago going through the LAX ports. That makes sense to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Following.
Yeah. So, and that's why it's neat to watch this graph because we saw a lot of shippers shift to the East Coast during all this period. And now me and Tony discussed it many times. Are they going to shift back, or are they going to keep what they've built and keep it on the East Coast? And I believe, if this line had stayed up here, they will go back to the West Coast eventually.
Awesome. Thanks, Donnie. We'll send it back over to Kaylee and Anthony.
All right, guys, thank you for that. We'll get one more carrier update before you're done here on your Wednesday. Right now, we're going to welcome in our next live guest, and we've got Amir Peleg joining us from Convoy to talk a little bit about their new dedicated on-demand service. Amir, thank you so much for joining us today on FreightWaves Now.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
So, Amir, jumping into it, excited to talk about this offering. So what is this really offering, and what is direct and on-demand? What is this whole thing about?
Yeah, we launched just yesterday. We launched publicly a new service for shippers, which is really bringing the dedicated capacities that shippers have come to know and love, predictable prices, unmatched quality, same drivers, with the flexibility that Convoy brings, flexible trailer pools that we can pull in and out automatically, and 400,000 drivers out there that we can pool. And it basically provides shippers what we think is dedicated capacity that's done right, the benefit of quality, the benefit of predictable prices, but also with the flexibility to go up and down, because we all know that shippers cannot forecast their freight, and therefore they end up with either underutilized assets or they have to fall back to the spot board, which they never want to go do.
I think a lot of what we've heard from shippers and even broker partners over the last 2 years has been the fact that shippers need kind of that middle ground, right? Where existing completely on the contract market or existing completely on the spot market just doesn't work for a lot of the way that business is actually done. Does this kind of set up that middle ground for shippers who maybe can exist in one of those two planes, but often find themselves needing something in between?
We think so, because shippers often have this predictable freight, and then they go to asset-based carriers, which have to find a power unit, they have to find a driver, and they have to dedicate a trailer. But then it's a fixed demand, or they have this unpredictable, sparse freight that they have or have to deal with a one-off. This dedicated capacity really brings those two worlds much closer together, because we have built over the years a platform that really can pull in drivers and take them away, which allows us to go and secure capacity in advance for a long period of time or a short period of time, which gives that quality and predictability, but then also flex in capacity as things go up, or go find them other work when shippers are not getting the volume that they're expecting.
And Amir, Convoy has always definitely been involved with pushing forward sustainability. Are there going to be any overlaps or impacts with sustainability with this new program?
Yeah, we think our routing technology, what we've seen with a few shippers that we've run this with over the last few months, is that we have built a platform for automated routing, which really allows us to go and reduce the empty miles. Again, a lot of that waste comes from the fact that with dedicated capacity, it is humans who are dealing with the shipper's volume and then trying to figure out a backhaul. And that's really hard to do when you're looking at a spot board manually, picking up the phone, etc. We have our platform, which really knows that this capacity is going to become available and go on the back route, and we find the work to fill it. And so that routing allows us to go and eliminate empty miles that otherwise would have been in the system.
So that decision-making process, so what does the data input look like? What data are you guys trying to gather from your existing shippers and carriers about what they have on demand or what their capacity needs are? And then how do you do that matching? Is it artificial intelligence? Are you using the kind of like automation systems to do that? What are you guys doing with that?
Yeah, so when a shipper comes to us and say, hey, I need a dedicated capacity, it is usually because they either have the predictable freight and they are looking for that fixed price so they can offer their retailer or their distributor a fixed cost per unit. So they know what they want and they come to us and we can figure out how many trucks we would need to go allocate on a regular basis. And that is sort of the baseline that we go and use. And from that point on, our systems know that that capacity is available. We also have a bunch of automation going over the spot boards, looking at our other contracts that are available, not through dedicated on demand. And we're able to go and do that matching, knowing what capacity is already available and what capacity is still out there. I hate to use the words of like artificial intelligence and machine learning because it is a lot of buzzwords, but it is what is happening behind the scenes on us being able to go and look at all of our demand, go and forecast and predict where tenders will materialize. And then we have a lot of algorithms that kick in for disruption management because we obviously don't get that right 100% of the time. So it's all about getting 80% of that right, and then really being able to real time go and adjust for the other 20% of the unknown that materialize.
And of course, as you mentioned, this being announced yesterday, what's the timeline on what can be expected with this being available to use? Is it already available, or will this be rolled out throughout the coming weeks or months here?
Yeah, we've been running with about 5 shippers for several months to make sure that everything is working and we're getting raving reviews and really happy customers. And so we're available to go and do this. And one of the things that, again, allows us to go do, because we have this large trailer pool nationwide and all of these carriers, we are able to set up a very large fleet within a matter of days, which is very unique for whether it's a small project, whether it's a failing carrier for a shipper. And so we're ready to come and take on more demand. We're looking forward to it.
It's exciting to see this offering. And if people want to kind of find out a little bit more, maybe sign up to see, where can they go to do that?
Yeah, on convoy.com, we posted a blog that details a lot more. And of course, reach out to anyone in Convoy on LinkedIn. We'll be happy to walk shippers through the capacity. Carriers already see that just from within our mobile app. When we have those offering, carriers are offered to go and join those contracts or serve them. So that has already been available, and we're looking forward to growing it with them.
This is definitely exciting, and Amir, when we're looking at this type of technology being used, I can only imagine that it's going to be more and more impactful to sustainability. We're looking at what Convoy has going on. Are there any trends that you're going to be watching closely that is going to really be impactful for the entire industry that we really need to really hone in on for sustainability and really being able to push that ESG mission forward?
Yeah, I think, this is one of the things that is always on our mind. One of the things we launched recently, I think you guys covered it, is a lot around how we operate and interact with carriers, really eliminating the wasted time and allowing them to go and plan carefully their time. There used to be, both today in traditional brokerages, but also with app-based brokerages, there's a lot of time wasted in trying to plan and figure out how do we exactly go and do plan our day. People bid, people negotiate. That could take days at times. We've launched instant bidding, which really allows carriers to go and plan their day to maximize their utilization. And so over 98% of loads on Convoy would be immediately responded to carriers, allowing them to really plan their day. Ultimately, our biggest impact is by eliminating those empty miles, allowing carriers to be highly utilized. And so we're working both on the carrier side to allow them to plan better. And then a lot of our investment goes into routing. How do we bring loads closer together? How do we match those? How do we partner with shippers and across shippers to really find that complementary freight that we can on the fly match for carriers to really maximize their loaded time, loaded miles on the road?
I think that's a great point. That efficiency is such a key thing and something that can be so very impactful for the entire industry. Amir, thanks so much for joining us this morning. If people want to reach out to you, how can they do that?
Yeah, I'm available. My email is on LinkedIn or an email dedicated on demand at convoy.com. We'll be happy to reach out and answer any questions and get going with this exciting offering.
Awesome. Looking forward to seeing how this develops. Thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me. Have a great day.
You too. Right now, we're going to head over to the wall because we have Kaylee Nix with another weather update.
All right, Anthony, thank you for that one. Moving into the Deep South for this next look at weather, talking about 2 days in a row of severe weather threat across the basically entire area of the Deep South. So let's check it out in Center Critical Events. Starting off with our first one right now. So this is day 1. This is today's severe weather risk, which is going to include the Dallas-Fort Worth metro, pretty wide area down through central Louisiana and up into Missouri, Kentucky, and Arkansas. That's going to be the whole slight risk. So this is level 2 out of 5 for a severe weather risk today. But zoomed in a little bit more, we have the level 3 out of 5 enhanced risk for today, which mainly includes just the eastern edge of Little Rock up through the I-40 corridor and into the Memphis metro area. Threats for today going to be strong winds, going to be pretty strong thunderstorms developing, possibly some hail, possibly some tornadoes as well with this setup. That's going to be kick-started here probably by about the mid-afternoon area. We've got some clearing going on in those lingering showers that we saw this morning, which is going to add some fuel to the atmosphere. It's pretty warm down here. We've got temperatures settling in the 60s right now and dew points in those low 60s. All the necessary fuel to lead to a decent chance at a severe weather outbreak. For our day 2 risk, it shifts eastward here, but it expands north to south. So we'll see the chance of severe weather, again, that enhanced risk, level 3 out of 5, all the way up from central Ohio, down through the Columbus into Cincinnati area, down in through Louisville, Kentucky, Lexington, here through Nashville, Chattanooga, Tennessee, Huntsville, Birmingham, all the way down into Jackson in southern Mississippi as well. So this is going to be a pretty widespread area of severe weather risk for tomorrow, day 2. But the bigger chance with this is going to be strong straight line winds as that cold front drapes across the central parts of the country, drives a pretty strong line of storms, and it turns more into that linear storm threat for us here. Either way, folks in these areas for today and tomorrow need to make sure that they've got multiple ways to get their severe weather warnings. That means make sure you've got a weather radio program to make sure you're following your local folks on social media. If you're a driver and you are driving through any of these areas today or tomorrow, go into your phone settings, turn on that receive local EWA alerts, your emergency alerts, so that way you get them no matter where you are. You're traveling that way. Multiple ways, and make sure you have a plan as well when it comes to what to do during severe weather. We're going to keep an eye on this as it continues to develop, and we'll talk more about weather coming up one more time here in the show. Right now, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
The 2023 Freight Tech 25 list is filled with meaningful innovators from across the industry who are helping shape what the future of supply chain will look like. Check out the full list of these companies and all the latest Freight Tech news at FreightWaves.com.
From the truckload quoting page within TMS, you can create a new shipment to instantly display your historical lane average alongside all of the market-leading rating intelligence tools. In just a few clicks, you can adjust the quote, add your margin, select your quote response template, and email an official quote right off to the customer from the same page. Request a demo today at tie-software.com to find out how TMS can optimize your quoting process.
Welcome to Drilling Deep. I'm your host, John Kingston. Drilling Deep is the place where we talk about oil and we talk about diesel, and you have to drill to get oil and you have to get oil to make diesel, so that's why we call it Drilling Deep. Drilling Deep drops every Friday on FreightWaves TV and all available podcast platforms.
Welcome back to FreightWaves Now. It's Wednesday, which means that it's time to put somebody on the hot seat.
Kaylee, are you okay?
I'm feeling a little feverish. It's a little warm in here.
Were you on the hot seat?
I'm on the hot stand right now, but let's check out when I was in the hot seat a couple weeks ago.
Well,
Welcome into the hot seat once again. I'm Bill Priestley. This is where we take an unsuspecting individual, give them 10 questions they have to answer, bring those answers straight to you here in this format. And joining us today, senior freightcaster and senior meteorologist Kaylee. Nick's joining us. How you doing, Kaylee?
Super great. Glad to be on the hot seat.
All right, you ready for 10 questions?
Let's do it.
I need 10 answers. Number one, normally a question about what you think your company is trying to solve, well, probably trying to solve. Rather, let me ask you this. What is the number one problem in freight right now that you think needs to be addressed and solved as quickly as possible?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I think the number one problem in freight is probably the ridiculousness of how the market swings back and forth due to folks' overcorrection. COVID, of course, threw us off pretty big time, but I definitely think that we need to have a focus on less overreaction and maybe some more proactive activity.
Nice. All right. Number two, who is the guest you most want to have on FreightWaves Now or Gray Quarter Gals that you have not had already?
So myself and Gray Sharkey literally talk about this all the time. Our number one Gray Quarter Gals guest, it's Carol Tomei from UPS. That is one of our bucket list guests. So Carol, every time we say this, if you're watching, come on the show.
All right. Excellent. Nice solicitation there as well. Number three, what's actually going through your head when you step out on the stage at F3 and see all the movers and shakers in the freight industry?
Not a single thing. Nothing. Totally mind blank. Because here's the thing, you walk out on the stage, the lights are so bright that you can really only see the people in the first few rows or so. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes those seats aren't necessarily occupied. But basically the secret sauce on this is that you walk out, you kind of just blur your eyes so that way you can't see anything at all. And then there's nothing going on. Whatever comes out of my mouth comes out of my mouth, and chances are no one will remember it in 5 minutes anyways.
So you don't subscribe to the looking at everybody as if they're naked?
Absolutely not. I just don't look at anybody at all.
All right. Number four, what is the next great achievement of women in freight?
Oh, this is a really good question. I don't know if it's a tangible achievement, but I think that we will really achieve something. It will be a big milestone when we can get women into the industry without a fear of their safety. And that's not even necessarily just from a driver perspective, because of course drivers are a target a lot of the times with women in safety, but women feeling safe in the general workplace, women feeling safe from sexual harassment, feeling safe to speak up in their workplace, women feeling like they belong in their workplace no matter their role. That is the next milestone achievement.
All right. Number five, what's the most famous person you've ever seen or run into at an airport, bus station, or just getting an Uber on the side of the road?
I don't necessarily know if I've run into anyone famous that I can think of. This one puts me on the spot, but I don't really know.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. Number six, you get to have dinner with anyone in the freight industry, living or dead. Who do you want to have dinner with?
Bill, you are making these questions really difficult for me.
That's why it's called the hot seat, Kaylee.
I think that I would want to sit down with Craig. And that's pretty accessible, right? Like his office is right next door. But I think that I would want to sit down with Craig, have dinner with him, maybe pick his brain. I'm actually going to say the entire Fuller family. So Craig, his two brothers, his mom and his dad.
Okay, all right. You're from New Mexico. Mm-hmm. You've lived in Oklahoma. You've traveled to Texas quite a bit. I've asked this question because I've had a number of people do this, and I'm just asking for references. If I want to drive from the southeast to Southern California, what's the best route to take?
Okay, so if we're starting in Chattanooga, you go Chattanooga, you take, was it 24 to 59 through Birmingham, 59 to 20, you're on 20 all the way through Dallas. You catch Dallas and then you go up around, you hit 40, go through Amarillo, and then 40 goes through Albuquerque, and then all the way through Arizona. Eventually you end up in LA. But it takes 16 hours to drive from Albuquerque, New Mexico to LA, Southern California. So you're looking at probably about a 2.5-day road trip.
All right, that's exactly what I wanted to hear from you there. Number 8, what is something you think will be mainstream in 10 years that is not mainstream now?
Specific to the freight industry?
Yes.
I think specific to the freight industry, actual transparency around what's going on in your deal making. So we know, obviously the FMCSA just came out with clarifications on dispatch services. I think that is the first step to everybody being honest about what goes on when they are buying and selling freight.
All right, number 9, another oddball question here for you. I'm giving you a semi, it's full of gas, it's got a trailer attached to it that's full of party supplies. Where are you going to take it to put on a party for the entire FreightWaves staff, and what's the theme of the party?
That's a really good question, too.
I think I'm going to take it to Chicago. And we're going to put on a party that is like Winter Wonderland themed, because the last time all the FreightWaves crew was in Chicago was 2019, and it was an event that was up there. They got stranded in a blizzard. It's like FreightWaves legend, this story, right? They still managed to put on this event, but I don't think anyone had a good time. And so I think that I would go and take the pressure of the event off of it, but just have a winter themed party and be like, guys, let's reminisce a little bit.
It's not bad to be lost in Chicago there anyway, even if you're snowed in. Last question. I know you've been rehearsing this one. Complete this sentence. Freight is blank.
Freight is fascinating. Absolutely, just hands down fascinating. There's always something new to learn, always someone new to talk to, always something new entering the industry, leaving the industry. It's always changing, and it impacts everybody's life.
It does as well. Kaylee, next you are off the hot seat.
Thanks, Bill. The 2023 Freight Tech 25 list is filled with meaningful innovators from across the industry who are helping shape what the future of supply chain will look like. Check out the full list of these companies and all the latest Freight Tech news at FreightWaves.com.
From the truckload quoting page within TieTMS, you can create a new shipment to instantly display your historical lane average alongside all of the market-leading rating intelligence tools. In just a few clicks, you can adjust the quote, add your margin, select your quote response template, and email an official quote right off to the customer from the same page. Request a demo today at tie-software.com to find out how TieTMS can optimize your quoting process.
Welcome to Drilling Deep. I'm your host, John Kingston. Drilling Deep is the place where we talk about oil and we talk about diesel, and you have to drill to get oil and you have to get oil to make diesel, so that's why we call it Drilling Deep. Drilling Deep drops every Friday on FreightWaves TV and all available podcast platforms.
Welcome back to FreightWaves Now. It's time for our final check of weather here this morning. We're going to be looking at some heavy rainfall across the area as we're going to be watching these strong to severe thunderstorms move through these next few days. With that, of course, we have to talk about the threat for tornadoes and hail, but we've got some saturated ground across the deep south, and these storms are going to bring fairly heavy rainfall there as well. Flooding could be a threat. So let's check it out in Sonar Critical Events. This is what we've got our forecast precipitation up on the map right now. You can see the heaviest rainfall going to be centered really from northern Kentucky down through central Tennessee and into central Alabama, southern Mississippi, right along that extended area of enhanced severe weather risk. So this is our day 2 risk, again, as I said in the last check of weather, level 3 out of 5, what we're looking for on this weather scale. But our biggest threat going to be for tomorrow, that heaviest rainfall. Some of these places have seen a pretty decent amount of rain over the last few weeks. So we're going to be getting a lot more rain on top of saturated ground, which means that we'll see runoff into those creeks and streams, possible ponding on the roadways, as well as even possibly some mudslides and some landslides. Some of these places high higher elevations. Some places like along the Tennessee-Mississippi border, just outside of Memphis, that could be expecting to see almost 3.5 to 4 inches of total rain throughout these next 2 days. So this is going to come pretty quickly, and it's going to involve just a lot of heavy rain, a lot of water over some saturated ground in a pretty short amount of time. Also with that, because of the severe weather risk, when you get that heavy rainfall coupled with the strong straight line winds, you get the potential for trees to be blown over, power lines to be blown over as well. So that's something that we need to be watching out for your Thursday on into your Friday morning. Overall, rain going to be short-lived, and it's going to clear out as the cold front moves through. But during that time period, heavy showers can expect to be found, and that can create some hazardous driving conditions out there on the interstates for drivers across the area. So as I mentioned in the last hit, just make sure that you've got multiple ways to get those severe weather warnings, and you've got your plan in place no matter where you are on your routes throughout these next few days. That's it for the weather today. We'll continue to watch this as we move throughout the rest of the week. We're going to toss things back over to Isaiah for a final check of the social roundabout.
Welcome into Social Roundabout, everyone. My name is Isaiah Buchanan. We take a look at what's trending on social media. Well, today is World Hippo Day, so what better way to celebrate than to learn some things about some hippos? One of my favorite TikTokers, he does his whole page is dedicated to just videos about different animals, and hippos have been a big topic of his over his TikTok career. Take a look at this one that shows just how dangerous these animals can be.
Friendly reminder that hippos don't swim, they're so dense that they sink to the bottom, so that hippo's literally sprinting at them full send underwater. Also, watch that video and count how many times the driver had to look back. As he knows as well as I do, getting caught up with a hippo is how your mother loses a dependent, as you finna be depending on the grace of God to ever walk again. Hippos are agents of malice and vehicles of population control with negative morality. This man rescued an orphan baby hippo from a flood in a river. The hippo went on to maul, murk, and mutilate his foster father in the very same river when he got older. This man was swallowed by a hippo not once but 3 times, and by the time he escaped, he had taken 38 bite wounds, including one so crucial that he and the people around him found out what his lungs looked like that day. Hippos are an Avengers-level threat to anything with a heartbeat, from humans to antelope to lions that don't know but mess around and find out. They're even menaces to each other, which is why a hippo baby shower can have a double meaning if things go south. Hippos are what would happen if killer whales had legs. That wasn't even a joke. The hippo's closest cousins are cetaceans like dolphins and whales. Hippos put 404s on at least 500 birth certificates a year, but some years that number could very well be in the thousands. I can't tell you what color his pants are, but they just got a brown paint job.
Are not to be trifled with. There are 2 hippos that are at the Cincinnati Zoo that have a pretty big social media following. This is Fiona and Fritz. Fiona on the right and Fritz is on the left. They are actually brother and sister. And I just wanted to show you that when they're young, they can be very, very cute animals, but as they get older, you don't want to mess with them, because the more you mess around, the more you find out. That's all I have for this edition of the Social Roundabout. So right now, I'll toss it over to Bill Priestley with our roundtable.
My 4-year-old is going to be very disappointed with that particular information. Welcome into the Roundtable. Bill Priestley here with you. Today we're going to be talking about some rather interesting things on the maritime front. And joining us, we've got 2 experts in that particular field. Lauren Began joins us, the maritime professor and also CEO of Squall Strategies, and Dr. Sal Mercagliano, associate professor of history at Campbell University. I thought I might title this segment "What's Going On with Shipping," but I realized that might have been stolen at this particular point. But let's start with a really interesting, just dynamic part of this industry, and that is, of course, we had the Ever Given just find itself in a bad place in the Suez Canal a couple of years ago, and now Maersk has decided to sue. Lauren, what's your reaction to it? I mean, this is 18 months after it happened.
Yeah, right. So it is quite a while after. I guess some of my initial thoughts were maybe it's tied to general average. That takes a long time. Maybe there's some larger legal strategy. If you do follow Dr. Mercagliano's channel, What's Going On with Shipping, he covered this just recently where he was saying we really haven't had a Suez Canal Authority report. Maybe this filing of the lawsuit will help force that action. I don't know. There's a lot that could be happening. There's some strategy behind this, I think.
Sal, I mean, it's Valentine's week, and leading up to it, we've had alliances break up, and now one carrier suing another. What's your take on this situation?
Yeah, I think one of the things we're seeing, and Lauren hits it right on the button there, is we're seeing Maersk force the issue here. I think a lot of issues we knew when this happened was going to take a long time to resolve, and maybe Maersk is now seeing the repercussions of charges and late fees and detention, demurrage charges that are coming up against them. And again, they're filing this in a Danish court. They're not doing this in Egypt. They're not doing it in Taiwan. They're not doing it in Japan. They're doing it in a Danish court. So obviously they're trying to get information out. And the Panama Authority has been really slow in getting the report out about this. The only information we really have comes from the court case that was done in Egypt after Egypt arrested the vessel and held it for 100 days. And so again, one of the things we were worried about was this ship blocked nearly 400 vessels, pushing them at least a week or two late. And the amount of damages that could be incurred by Ever Given is substantial. And again, one of the things we don't know is, was this the ship's fault? Was it the pilot's fault? We don't know it because the information has not been released.
Lauren, turning back to, I feel like this is could be a situation where, if you've heard those commercials which say, if you've ever taken such and such drug from 2000 here to 2000 that, and you've had a problem, obviously the Ever Given created a massive problem. Is this a situation where you could see a massive pile-on?
Yeah, I mean, so all that is right. It's class action lawsuits. I don't know if this is going to turn into a class action lawsuit against the Ever Given. It might turn into a pile-on. It really I think, depends on what the intention was here. If it really is forcing the issue, trying to get this report out, maybe that's something. Maybe it really is to recover some of the delay, right? So general average doesn't cover compensation for delay. But if they can get a report that points to somebody being the person that was in charge of things going wrong, then maybe it switches away from general average and it moves into compensating maybe all those shippers that were part of the general average and puts it on one person. Then you start talking about, can one person or one entity take on that much legal financial liability?
Yeah. Sal, real quick, best guess, I know we don't know a ton at this point, but is this going to be a massive judgment perhaps against Ever Given eventually?
It's hard to tell. I mean, we just saw the report come out from the Coast Guard on Everforward, which went aground last March off of Baltimore, which basically points at the master and the pilot. One of the things we know with legal battles when it comes to shipping is they're long and they're prolonged, and the answers are far from ever happening fast. So it's no telling. Although I do think an alliance merger between Maersk and Evergreen may be off the books right now.
You're probably close on that one there as well. Lauren, real quick, your thoughts. I mean, could this be very detrimental to Evergreen in the long run?
It depends on really what the purpose is. I mean, it might be that Ever Given might be kind of the sacrificial lamb, really, and really they're looking for this report out of the Suez Canal Authority, and maybe, like Sal said, this is going to take a long time. It might even get pulled up into a higher international court. We'll see.
Okay, let's move on. We got another issue that has kind of come to the forefront, especially along the Russian front, with the price cap of Russian crude coming out, as well as disallowing of Russian vessels, or at least coming in and out of Russia in the form of shadow fleets, have started to become more headline news these days. Sal, do shadow fleets right now, this seems like an out clause for anyone that doesn't necessarily want to play by the rules. Is that kind of what you're seeing here?
Yeah, and it's not unusual. We've seen shadow fleets for a long time. This has been operating with North Korea, Iran, Venezuela to get around sanctions. What makes this different is the scope and scale of this is much bigger than we've seen in the past. I mean, you're dealing with a price cap not just on Russian crude, but now on Russian diesel fuel. And we're seeing some states get involved in this, especially in the ship-to-ship transfer. So you just had Spain, for example, go against Maersk for doing an illegal ship-to-ship transfer off its coast. This is expanding. And, Greg Miller's article on this was really good because Greg touched on, I think, all the major issues that are at play here. We're talking about ship-to-ship transfers from smaller vessels to larger vessels. You can't get the big super tankers into the Baltic and Black Sea, so you got to do these ship-to-ship transfers. Then you're moving this oil to be refined or shipped through other states. It is a myriad of problems. At the same time, the Greeks are making huge amounts of money over this because of the long-distance traveling involved. Ships are not going to be scrapped right now. They're just going to disappear into these shadow fleets, and you're going to get more profitability out of them. And we're seeing, again, reports coming in from all the major oil firms and all the tanker firms of just increased profits right now. So, the negative against this is outweighed by a lot of what people are viewing as positives: more oil on the field, more diesel out there, and depressed prices.
Lauren, as Sal mentioned, this has become a much bigger issue than I think anybody expected. And certainly, at least initially, we've had shadow fleets for a long time, as he mentioned. But what do you see this? Is this a threat, really, kind of to the commodities economy, especially when it comes to oil and crude?
Yeah, I think we're just getting started here, right? So February 5th was when the EU ban went in place. So we're only 10 days past that. So, I think the world of oil shipments has kind of changed and will continue to change. And if we already were seeing this increased fleet of shadow fleets, I think it's probably only going to expand as there's more sanctions put in place here.
Sal, going into that expansion, are you looking at, say, for instance, a situation where the exception may become more the rule, or are we just still miles away from that?
I think it really comes back to what is trying to be done to Russia. Again, go back to what the sanctions' intended purpose was to keep oil flowing, but at the same time punish Russia for doing that. The problem you have is what Russia is doing is by flooding the market with oil and diesel is depressing the price of oil and diesel around the world and forcing this oil and diesel to travel longer distances. And so you're seeing diesel being pulled out of the United States, diesel being pulled out of Asia to fill the diesel in Europe, while at the same time, the shipping firms are hauling this cargo over longer distances. And I think this is the G7, the EU, and the major nations of the world trying to punish Russia, but in truth, what they're doing is what you're finding out is punishing via shipping is a tough thing to do because it will adjust. It's like water on a sidewalk. It will find the cracks and get through.
Yeah, Lauren, to that same effect, what does the effect of this shadow fleet expanding have perhaps on the rest of shipping, especially those carriers that are using the right insurance, that have the right flags on them, or have flags on them that are understood and welcomed in other countries?
Yeah, certainly it seems right off the bat that it might be incentivizing some of the bad stuff, right? If you're doing everything correctly and following all of these sanctions and following all of that, if the shadow fleets stay profitable, the demand is going to move that way. And so I think your point is kind of well alluded there that this might be detrimental to the people who are following the rules. But I think as the kind of punishment of Russia outweighs the demand or the need of this Russian oil, I think, there was the initial pulling off the Band-Aid, and now I think there's kind of this adjustment in the marketplace. If the largest economies can figure out a way of getting a little bit off of that Russian oil, or in the meantime, keeping the price low, right? Like that's part of the sanctions is keeping low oil and diesel prices here. So it's going to be interesting to see how this continues to play out.
That's going to be very interesting there as well. Lauren Beegan and Sal Mercagliano, thanks so much for joining us. I know that we're going to keep a close eye on both of these situations, seeing how Evergreen is going to deal with their issues, as well as, of course, Russia and how they manipulate things through shadow fleets. Thanks so much for sticking around.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Bill.
All right, that's going to do it for our roundtable. We'll take a short break, come back and wrap up our show right after this.
Hey Hey everybody, this is Thomas Watson, enterprise trucking carrier expert here at FreightWaves, telling you about my show, Loaded and Rolling. Now, it involves trucking topics for large carriers and even small ones that wish to be large. Anything that impacts trucking, you can get it there. You can catch us every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern on tv.freightwaves.com. We do it live.
From the truckload quoting page within TieTMS, you can create a new shipment to instantly display your historical lane average alongside all of the market-leading rating intelligence tools. In just a few clicks, you can adjust the quote, add your margin, select your quote response template, and email an official quote right off to the customer from the same page. Request a demo today at tie-software.com to find out how TieTMS can optimize your quoting process.
Welcome back to FreightWaves Now. It's time for our final check of into January report, finding that more freight flowing into the truckload space for the month. The shipments index was flat with December on a seasonally adjusted basis, but down 3.2% on an unadjusted comparison. The index normally sees a low to mid single-digit decline from December to January. Several management teams said that January likely benefited from the freight markets because of a backlog of freight due to winter storms that we saw in December. The Chicago warehouse real estate market keeps growing with 48 big box buildings delivered during 2022. Those are buildings that are 200,000 square feet or bigger. The total square footage for those deliveries stood at 25.5 million square feet. 35 of those buildings were developed on a speculative construction, so there was no tenant commitments before construction was finished. The 48 builds were the most ever seen on record for a single year, and a 46% increase than the previous record year. And Finnair has made a simple modification to its manufacturer's weight specifications, allowing the airline to carry an extra 9 tons of cargo and passengers on its A350 twin-aisle jets. This will help the carrier haul more on its key Asia routes that have been forced to detour around Russia due to the war in Ukraine. Finnair said that it has modified 10 of its 17 A350s in its fleet to increase capacity for aircraft that regularly serve Tokyo and South Korea on routes from Helsinki, Finland. And you can find details of those stories and more on FreightWaves.com and our FreightWaves app. If you're watching us live on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe to stay updated. For the full FreightWaves TV experience, head on over to tv.freightwaves.com. We're going to toss things back over to the wall for our final carrier update.
Welcome into the final carrier update of the morning. Donnie, looks like we're going to be digging in some lanes.
Yeah, so sticking with the with imports, I'm going to run some lanes just out of some of our ports here, and particularly some of these that are on the East Coast here. So looking at Jacksonville, a lot of freight coming out of Jacksonville might run to Atlanta. Of course, it might run by rail, but some of it's going to run by truck as well. So looking at this lane right here, a little bit below our NTI, which today is 238. So down a little bit lower than it's getting almost close to that 235. That was one of our lowest points ever. We're looking at $1.95 coming out of Jacksonville, head up to Atlanta. Of course, you know Florida is very difficult to get freight out of, and rates are very low. 345-mile trip, so it might be a little bit difficult to get up there and all the way back in one day due to the mileage and due to probably Atlanta traffic, but you'll still clear about $1.95, maybe $2 a mile on this lane. Turn it around, hit the little double arrows there, and flip it back from Atlanta, headed back to Jacksonville. Pays a little bit better, and it's increasing right now up to $3.17. So here we're still looking at about a $2.50 average rate per mile on this, technically 600 and almost 700 mile round trip. Next lane, move up just a little bit. Let's look at Savannah. One of my favorite ports here. They put a lot of money in rebuilding this port, trying to get the bigger boats in there. They just received some of the biggest cranes that will unload, some of the biggest and fastest cranes for ship unloading. They received them. They're not in place yet. So they'll get that put implemented into their ports, and hopefully get all those ships unloaded a little bit faster here. But leaving Savannah, you're going to be about $250 a mile. So it pays a little bit better than leaving Jacksonville, but your mileage is a little bit shorter, about 100 miles shorter, is 248 miles. But this might open you up to where you can pick up, deliver, and actually make it back in one trip. So weigh your options. This might be the better lane for you. Hit a little double arrows and let's bring it back. Atlanta headed back to Savannah, 280. So we're still right around that 250, 260, 270 on the average here. So the average is a little bit better on this lane, but like I say, per round trip, you're going to be about 200 miles total shorter on this. So weigh in, would it be better for you to leave Florida and go to Jacksonville? Or would it be better for you to mingle up just a little bit further up, deadhead? Of course, you're paying for your deadhead, and pick up some rates that are a little bit higher. So we'll see. Next lane, let's look at Norfolk. Let's look at Norfolk, maybe some freight coming in Norfolk and heading up to Harrisburg to be distributed up into the Northeast. Rates are trending down just slightly, but they're still an average of $3.63 per mile for a 300-mile run. Pretty good rate for that, well above our NTI down here. That's at 238. Hit my little double arrows there and bring it back. Harrisburg headed back. If you got freight going back to the Norfolk, Virginia hub, it's still at 333. So this is actually a much better lane. I was quite surprised with the rate out of Harrisburg. It has picked back up slightly, but normally when you're trying to get out of Harrisburg, rates are a lot lighter. So headed back to Norfolk if you're local. This could be a pretty good run for you, even though you're on spot rates above $3 a mile.
Great. Thanks, Donnie. We'll send it back over to Kaylee and Anthony.
All right, guys, thank you for that. And we're done for your Wednesday, but of course, plenty more content coming up throughout the rest of the day. It's Wednesday, which means that Tim Jenner is back with our flagship show, What the Truck, in just about an hour.
That's right, and there's going to be more content coming on after that as well, with an episode of Fuller Speed Ahead not too long after that, and a lot more. But also, there's going to be time for you to still get registered for our upcoming virtual event, which is going to be amazing, and of course, a Super Bowl of virtual events in the supply chain.
Free registration coming for Global Supply Chain Week. That'll start next Tuesday right here on FreightWaves TV. We'll be live at 9 a.m. Myself and Anthony Smith hosting you through 3 full days of the best supply chain content out there. Maritime, CPG, retail, e-commerce, food and beverage, you name it, automotive, heavy industry, you want it. We've got it when it comes to Global Supply Chain Week. So head on over to live.freightwaves.com and get registered. We'll see you guys tomorrow morning starting live at 9. Have a great rest of your Wednesday.